of living on the waterfront. When the sun goes down, the water turns. I'm glad to be here, Mark. I always love working with you and Christina and the team. Got some other folks invited that may be jumping in here as well. So glad, the more the merrier. And I'm going to keep the lecture part of this brief. I don't want to spend a whole half hour talking because I know some people have questions, and we'll sort of go in and out of lecture mode that way, if you don't mind, so that I'm talking about things you care about. I want to kind of give you some updates. Like I said, I'm in Austin, or Lakeway. It's a waterfront on Lake Travis, just outside of Austin. And I switch my time between here, I split it between here and my ranch in Llano, Texas, which is about 85 miles that way. So it's only about an hour and 15 minutes from one place to the other, and I go back and forth. I just came back from almost a month in Canada, right up until Thanksgiving time. I was in Canada. I went mid-October to help prepare for the launch, because there's a lot goes into a launch. As you know, I've helped launch pretty much every territory there is, almost all of them. And I did spend some time in Japan as well, but I had a keen interest in Canada because Canada was very successful for me years ago. In 1999, I spearheaded the launch of XL Canada, taking long distance into Canada, and we took it all across the country, all the provinces, which was a mess, by the way. It's so much nicer when you can go one province or one state or region at a time instead of having to try and do all of it. And what I wanted to start with is talk a little bit about that expansion, because one of my greatest successes has been just that, is claiming your part of all new territories. Now, let me say up front, it's really true that you don't have to go anywhere. You can just build in your hometown, build in your neighborhood, if you will, and slowly your business will spread across the country, and because of Ambit's expansion, across the world. But I didn't want to go slowly. I've been in network marketing now for like 24 years. When I started Ambit, I was 51 years old. I said, this is it. This is the last one. I left as the number 12 money earner of another company to come over here and start over at zero. And I said, I want it, and I want it now. I teased that one of my favorite prayers is, dear Lord, I pray for patience, and I want it right now. So patience is not one of my virtues. So I like to go out and grab it. And when we first expanded, our first expansion out of Texas, of course, I helped open Texas. When I joined, Ambit was very small. There were only meetings in Austin. Me and some others started a meeting in Round Rock, Texas, just a suburb north of Austin, Texas. And then I helped start the Houston meeting. So my typical week was to go Tuesday night and do the Round Rock presentation, then Wednesday morning drive to Houston. And I would spend Wednesday usually through Saturday in Houston, meeting people, building relationships, having coffee shop meetings, gym meetings, wherever I could get people to meet. And then, of course, every night we would host a formal presentation, even if it was just 3 or 4 of us. And it grew very rapidly. That's where, people like Chris Atkinson and Pastor Kenny Smith and a lot of big players came. We tease now. I don't get to Houston as often as I used to, because I tease that you can't swing a dead cat in Houston, not hit an EC or NC. They're everywhere there because of the success of the team. But what'll surprise you is if you don't have anything in Houston, Texas, you better get it, because that is the #1 territory in all of Ambit Energy. Texas still is almost half of the growth every day, every week, and every month of all of Ambit is Texas. Now, we're already up to 7% market penetration. We're the 3rd largest provider of electricity in the state of Texas. I'm not talking about network marketing companies. That's energy providers. We're the 3rd largest, yet it's still the fastest growing territory, because the bigger you become, the bigger a pebble you're throwing in that pond, the more ripples go out. So to those of you in Pittsburgh or wherever you might be listening tonight, let me tell you, you better always ask people, who do you know that knows somebody in Texas? Because Texas is still a huge part of the business. I'm blessed with one of the largest teams all over America, now Japan and Canada. But I got to tell you, still more than 40% of my income comes out of Texas. So there's my little pitch. don't think that just because it's been there a while or there's a lot of leaders, there's not something to be built. Because, I started this conversation with Houston. There's close to 5 million people in the greater Houston area. And, so every time we pick up a percentage point in Texas or in Houston or Dallas, that is a huge number of people. But from the Houston meeting, that led me to people in the Valley. And that's where I helped Rigoberto Yepes and some leaders like that, national consultant Rigo, get started. And also West Texas. And that's where I got to start working with Glenda Farmer and some of the ECs and really powerful people out there, back into Dallas and some great leaders we have on our team in Dallas. I went to East Texas quite a few times and helped back then senior consultant Coach Alan Johnston building his business and hosting his meetings. Of course, he's a $1 million earning EC now, soon to be an NC. But those are, I dropped those names just to tell you that's where it all started, is by people going out and helping in each community. Now, I'll tell you selfishly, each of those people I named did really good in their territory, but initially they stayed in their territory. The difference in what they did and what I did is I reached out to those territories. Once I had a few people there, then I make the trip. Now, it's real important that you clearly know, just because you sponsor somebody in Alberta or Houston or California, don't rush out there to help them. I did that back in the 90s. I was really strong that every time I'd sponsor somebody, I'd just jump on a plane or jump on my car and go help those people. And what a failure, because they did good while I was there doing it for them, being, like Marc said, a salesman for them. But when I left, it all shut down and it all became about me, and you just can't build a very big organization. So, but once you have somebody, let's say you sponsor somebody in, San Francisco, if you can help them over the phone and they make it to regional consultant and take action after they get to regional, you need to go help plant the flag. You need to build it. And that's what I did. My first conversations with the people in the Valley, Chris and Debbie, were working with them, and they said, hey, when can you come help? And I said, when can you promise me to have 50 people in the room? And Rigo took that serious. And, by the time I showed up, they were shooting for 50. Hi, Christina, and had close to 100 people show up. And I did the same thing in West Texas. I'd say, Glenda, I'm not coming out to meet with 10 or 15 people. Let's build it big. Sense of urgency. Put demands, if you will, on how people earn your time. And of course, those meetings took off, and, Dallas has always been huge. Houston became multiple nights a week, very huge organizations. And then alas, we opened New York City. I didn't know really anybody in New York. I knew 3 people. I'd only been there once, and that was with my previous company, World Ventures. And I just said, it's the economic capital of the world. I'm going to go get my part. People laughed at me, and a lot of you have heard that story, but I went. What was amazing, I got there and found us at the big pre-launch that there was literally 150, maybe 200 Texans up there wandering around New York trying to grab everybody and start their business. But I knew from my past experience that too would fade, and that's what happened. And a week or two later, I found myself still in New York City, but I was alone. And for that next 6 months, I think 1 week I would go, and the following week I'd work Texas, and Carlos Merrim would go up. And Carlos and I kept in touch, and we kind of rotated, although he chose to primarily go after the Spanish-speaking market and did wonderful things with them, and I tried to go after all the other markets. And that's what got New York going for us. Then we opened Chicago. I did the same thing. I sponsored some people in Chicago. Then I went out to help them once they made regional. And I started going 1 week Texas, 1 week New York City, 1 week Chicago. And I continued that until the next territory came along. And what I'm saying here is, if you start a new territory, as Marc, you and Christina did with me in Columbus, once you start it, you've made a commitment to a bunch of people. You got to be there to see the job through, and you got to be there often enough to make it successful. So don't overstretch yourself. But the clarity here is, I didn't leave Houston until we had a bunch of leaders really capable of doing it, whether I was there or not. I didn't back off of New York City until we had leaders capable of doing it, whether we're there or not. Same thing in Chicago and Baltimore and all the different territories. And so it is in Canada. So when Japan launched, I didn't take the pre-approach there. I didn't know much in Japan. I knew two people that were Japanese descent, one in Hawaii, one in Los Angeles. I put them both in the business, and lo and behold, before I got to the actual launch date, one of them already quit taking my calls, and the other one actually returned my call and said, I just can't do this right now. But I met actually through a referral, the son of a former girlfriend from years ago, of all things, that had been living and working in Japan. So I started with him and put him in business. And then I made the trip to Japan. And I have to say, I wouldn't have gone over to spend almost 4 weeks in Japan just on the organization I had, because I wasn't making it happen in a personal way. But I was fortunate that there was 5 or 6 ECs on my team already in Japan, already building teams. And I took my job at a new level now, is to go in and help them spearhead that, help them set up meetings, because it's important that it gets set up correctly. So most of the people on my team in Japan, and there's 4,000 people on my team in Japan now, but most of the people are either not coded to me, or there's 1,500 that are coded to me, but they're also under another executive consultant. So that's one of the blessings of getting yourself to national, is that you can actually be helping executives set up their business and still get paid for it. So it's an amazing thing, but that's why I don't go back to Japan all the time. My job was to visit every market, work with all the leaders that were committed to it, help them get it going. And I know I've left it in capable hands. And then I do webinars, and I'll visit when they need me. But you have to play where the money is. And that coding is primarily to other executive consultants, with me possibly as the national. So it's really not my place to go lead the charge, if you will. Canada was different, because in '99, I didn't know anybody in Canada. XL announced that they were going to go to Canada. So I wrote letters. By the way, wasn't email back then. I wrote snail mail letters, and I mailed letters after doing the research to 250 insurance agents in Canada. And I called every one of them multiple times. I put myself through the worst rejection you could possibly have there. And out of all 250 with multiple calls apiece, I had about 7 that said they would talk to me if I came. So I went up there, and from that 7, I think I signed up originally 4 of those people, and they were spread out around the country. But one of the best was Marc and Pam. They were agents like I was. I was an insurance agent then. They had a young agency in Calgary, Alberta. We hit it off, and he and I back then used to teasingly do presentations, because we're both 6'5". They would call us the Twin Towers. In '01, we kind of had to drop that title. It wasn't quite so funny anymore. But we did a lot together. XL bombed at that point. They stuck to long distance service. It became free. Bell Canada bought XL, exercised their option and bought it. And so now our competitor owned us, and that put us in a very bad situation. And XL just went away. But Marc and Pam and I kept our friendship, as well as a few other people in Canada from those days. There's that relationship part, Marc, you introduced when we started. So I've stayed in touch with them. They've watched my growth in Ambit. We still vacation together a couple times a year. They've become very successful. Back then, I was a big State Farm agent, and Marc was a younger, more struggling agent. And boy, it turned around now. Marc and Pam own the #1 auto insurance in all of Canada agency, one of the top fire producers, top life producers. It's $1 million+ income agency, a huge agency growing. The only problem I said going into this is they don't need it anymore. But they loved it. They loved the challenge. And when I called them and said, we're coming to Alberta, they said, when are you coming? So I flew back up there in mid-October, because we had another challenge, is that they spend every November in Hawaii. And this was their 25th anniversary, so they weren't about to skip that trip. So I flew up early to have them introduce me to everyone they could, so establish some relationships. So when they went to Hawaii, I actually stayed at their home for another 2 weeks without them. And it continued to build the business, and we got off to a great start there. And then I came back to Texas, and some of the Canadians are either on the webinar right now, or they're listening to it by telephone. And I like to say I'm bilingual. I'm from Texas, so we say y'all a lot. But now when I'm there, I say, y'all come over here, eh? Because you got to get it both ways there. So that's what's happened. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about Canada because it's not past tense. That's right now. We launched, but let me tell you, it's really more like a pre-launch because when you go into a new country, your first thought is to do it your way. And guess what? That very seldom works. You have to adapt and learn to do it the Canadian way. Same thing in Japan. We tried for months to, I guess, teach the Japanese how we do business. And instead, we finally became humble, and the Japanese are teaching us how to do business. And that's what's making it successful. So we adapt to where we're going. In Canada, we had some challenges. It's a little different. It's a different country. The regulations are different. Waiting periods, just the mere process of putting a customer in was a struggle because the computer systems that we thought were all matched up were not all matched up. There's a lot of things you just can't know until you know, and we didn't know till we got there. And I'm so proud of Ambit. There's a lady, if you ever meet her, named Jenny Dieter. I just met her. Now, she's been at Ambit for more than 10 years. And I've been there 11 years. And I understand she's been in charge of 44 of the launches. She's the head lady, and I didn't even know who she was. I would call back multiple times a day with my problems to the marketing team, Daryl and Eric and their group, and then wait for them to get back with me. And after a couple of days of that, suddenly I got a call from this lady, and she said, hey, I talked to Daryl, and he gave me permission to contact you directly. Thank goodness that was still in October, because then I started communicating with her 5 or 6 times a day, sending copies of bills. They had the rating wrong. That's why you saw the rate change in Canada. The research had not been as correct as we would like it to be. And I tell you all this to say nobody gets everything right. The best thing about Ambit is we have an eraser on the other end of our pencil. We don't stand there and say, oh, we're right all the time. We say, what do we need to do to fix it? And I was watching them literally jump through hoops in a 2 or 3 day period. I saw us go from $3.15 a gigajoule. They don't use therms up there. It's metric. It's gigajoule to $1.80 and put us from totally uncompetitive to very competitive in the marketplace and adopting our products to do it. So that's what we have in Ambit. Just know that, excuse my cough, suffering a little allergies. Just know that when you go into a new territory, they're gonna do the best research they can and do the best they can to get it right, but it's not likely to all be right when you first go in. Well, because of that, it's free. Anybody in Canada can join for free right now. You probably saw the announcement that I've been begging for the past week or two, and that is they extended the jumpstart period. So now everybody that's a founding Canadian consultant has till January 12th to gather their customers, because a lot of them got in, tried to put themselves or their first customer in, had a problem with it, and said, you know what, I'm just not going to do this until they get all these problems worked out. So we saw literally, there's 300 people on my team there now, and I literally only saw a few of them manage to trigger a bonus. And if people don't get paid, they go away. So Ambit did the right thing again. I pointed that out to Ambit. They did the research, came back and said, that was Friday night last week. They said, yes, next week we'll announce that we're going to give them an extension. And sure enough, a couple hours ago, they extended them all till January 12th. So it's like starting over in Canada, but we already have a few hundred people to do it with. The meetings are exciting. The first meeting I did up there in Calgary was, like 80 people. The following week, it was 150. The following week, it was close to 250. So a lot of people, a lot of excitement, but there's still a lot of skepticism because we are an American company coming in. I give you some scoop. We're also opening a corporate office in Calgary, Alberta. So we'll have a bit of a presence there, probably be a one-person office, but it'll be nice to have someone there to help coordinate it. We only opened a meeting in Calgary so far. The plan was to open Calgary and Edmonton both, and I pushed for Calgary, Edmonton, and Red Deer, but at the last minute, they pulled Edmonton off because we thought we should just concentrate on one market to get it right, and they're probably right to do so because we made our mistakes up mostly in one place. But for those of you thinking about Canada, don't just go up there. If you think it's tough to meet and sell strangers here, they look like us. They mostly talk like us and eat like us, but they think of us as foreigners. and they're going to be a little more skeptical. So you need to develop the relationship before you go. I only went because I knew I could have success because I instantly put a half dozen people that were in my old Excel group from 17 years ago back into the business now, and they're already building a good team. But don't just go up there, just ask, who do you know that knows somebody? On the other hand, if you get somebody sponsored and they start building a team and you're helping them by phone and they participate with the local group, that local group, you don't know anything about downlines in the local group. When you're in Canada, they're all on the same team. Everybody pulls together. It's a beautiful situation, and it's from every ethnic background, every language. If you think New York City's diversified, you need to visit Canada. They teach you about diversification. The difference is they don't distinguish between the different ethnic groups. They just lump them all together. They're all Canadian. So it's a pretty beautiful thing to watch as an American that has been raised to think differently about it. Their culture is much more mixed and more advanced than ours is. So we're only in ATCO territory. So that means primarily we're a gas-only provider in Alberta. We do have electricity, but it's not in Edmonton, not in Red Deer, and not in Calgary. Now, I just named 3 cities that make up 2.5 million of the population, and the whole province is only 3 million. So there's not that much left. I did sign up some electric customers, and my team's signing them up some, mostly in rural areas, southeast and east of Calgary, and also what I call the Great White North. When you get up from Fort McMurray north of there, it becomes electric territory. But those are mostly villages, smaller towns, small communities. But we're staking the claim because that's ATCO. The next thing that we're going to hope to have is Inmax, which is the incumbent electric provider in Calgary area and all of southern Alberta. And then Fortis, which is the incumbent provider of electricity in Edmonton, Red Deer, and then the rest of the territory. So pretty much we get those 3. We got it. So it's a powerful situation. I will give you one bit of good news. Those of you that have country people like me, I had a great time in some of the farm communities because they're gas and electric, but they're in co-ops. But guess what? Their co-ops are for gas only. They still buy their electricity delivered by ATCO, so we can do business with good old boys like me, and that's a powerful way to be. I will tell you that I have an advantage too because I'm a Texan. You might say I'm a redneck, and so are they. Alberta is an oil economy, oil and gas. The largest outdoor rodeo in the world happens in Calgary every July. They're very strong in their Western motif. So I'd advise you might want to pass yourself off as a Texan when you go there because they'll like you better than being from Pennsylvania or New York or something. Like I was telling Kirk Horan the other night, I said, be sure and point out that you live several hundred miles from New York City, not in New York City, so they don't beat you up or anything on the street. But no, it's a great community. I love working with the people. Canadians are just friendly, but they're smart and they're not gullible. So don't go up, try and blow a bunch of smoke up their skirts. These are people that you give the facts to. When you make mistakes, you tell them you made mistakes. You don't know, you say, I don't know, and you get them an answer. Then they'll embrace you and be your team members. I predict that every 6-8 months we'll be open in another part of Canada until eventually we're at least in all 3 provinces that are deregulated. To my knowledge, that's Alberta, British Columbia, and Ontario. Of course, Ontario's the biggest one. Those of you in the Northeast can just jump in your car and drive over there. You can get to a city like Toronto where there's 7 or 8 million people. There's a lot to be done there. I've worked there in the past too, so I look forward to it. But don't wait for that to happen. I promise you, the people that come in your business in Alberta are going to get way more business in British Columbia and in Ontario than you ever were. And that's what it's all about at a launch. Just make sure wherever you are, whatever you're doing, that you end your sentence with, oh, by the way, who do you know that might know somebody in Alberta, Canada? With that, I'm going to take a drink, stop the coughing, and we'll go to the Q&A.
All right, Steve, thanks for that. I do have a couple questions before we jump into Q&A. I noticed when the first time I met you, like personally when we were in Ohio, that you have, tenacity, a lot of drive. and you really work this business like it's a real business, and I think there's a lot of times where leaders are kind of, they want to kind of slow things down, and you're the opposite. I remember one time you kind of got on us because we didn't book a lunch and a dinner in the same day. You're like, hey, what am I doing here? What keeps you going like that? I mean, what keeps you going when you really don't have to be doing that?
Well, I don't have to, and I don't go as hard as I used to, in that I used to travel 20, 25 nights a month. Now I travel generally, 3 or 4, maybe 5 nights every 6, 7 weeks. But when I do go, when I am in work mode, I work with the importance. There's 3 or 4 things you have to be successful. And one is sense of urgency. The other is commitment, because people will hear and see your commitment. And the other, so sense of urgency, commitment, and then you have to have a certain excitement level. Now, I don't bubble over, but if you can't see the excitement when I'm talking about what's coming in Canada, you're just not paying attention. And always be short of time. I'm always tapping my wrist. Everything has to be in a hurry. There's 2 ways to build an ambit business or any network marketing business: fast or slow. And all I can tell you is fast is the only way to go. There's always going to be people quit. More than half the people that ever come in are going to quit or reach their goals and go to sleep or whatever, sit on the bench, become very part-time, whatever it is. All that's important to know is that if you're growing too slowly, then attrition will outrun you and you'll be defeated. You'll feel defeated. And just when you feel that loss, people are going to see that and not want to join you. People, everybody wants to ride with a winner. So you got to make the decision to be a winner. And that means business-like. That means setting appointments. Don't do one thing a day. Do 9 things a day if you can. You've got to, like I told you, if I was going to come in, I wouldn't come just for the evening meeting. Let's have a lunch the next day, or let's have a lunch the same day. And I expect someone to pick me up and carry me around in the morning and the afternoon. Just introduce me to your friends and let me really teach you how to do an invitation. Because you guys know that it's not the presentation where we fail, or even the close. It's the invitations where most people fail. And no matter how much you teach it, people will not learn the invitation unless you go show it to them. Everybody's scared to death of rejection. We've all been rejected before. When they hit a rejection, they're going to quit inviting. So you need to go show them how to invite and share that pain with them and help them through that threshold. So I appreciate you noticing that. But yeah, to me, this is business. Play where the money is. Get serious, and get after it.
Another question for you, Steve, is, John Maxwell talks about the law of the lid. And we were just talking about that the other night. Who sets your leadership lid for you personally? And then also to tie into that, I know during Ambition, you were going to go on stage with John and share some thoughts, and the power went out. So can you kind of enlighten us on what was going to happen there?
Yeah, we did record earlier, so those recordings are out, and that's good to have. And that was basically what I was going to talk about. Well, literally, I was standing on the top of the stairs backstage, mic'd up, in my jacket, ready for the curtain to open when the power went off. And so I went back and sat down backstage and sat there for a few minutes, and Jerry came out and different people. And I finally realized that my performance was going to be at lunch. So it didn't happen, but I kick my own lid off. And, I find it difficult to do what sometimes, what we all teach. You want to surround yourself with other people who are doing bigger, better things than you are. And that's how you grow. And I find it difficult sometimes because of the work habits I've had to find those people in my company or present with me. Instead, I find those people by reading about them and listening to their tapes and studying what they're doing. I studied John Maxwell 30 years ago. Never did I think I'd share the stage with John, and I have several times now. I've been studying Zig Ziglar since I was in my early 20s, and then a couple of years ago, I found myself in Zig Ziglar's office in a prayer circle with him, and talking about the future and getting invited to go do a training with him. You just never know what the limit is, but you may have to kick your own lid off. You may not be able to find people to run with you that want to run as hard as you do. And that's why I've adapted this procedure where there's some super great leaders on my team like you guys. But I change leaders pretty rapidly so that I don't find myself tempted to slow down with another leader, if you will. In other words, everybody has got their ups and downs of when they'll work. And if I'm working with you and you're going into your down period, you might see me look like the Lone Ranger as I ride off in the horizon. I'm grabbing onto another leader because I like to rise with people. So, and I'm real blessed by that. I mean, there's 260 executive and national consultants on our team. So finding somebody to work with is not hard. The heartache is the people that want you to work with them, but they don't deserve your help because they're sitting on the bench or they're doing a parade wave or they're taking it easy. Love them to death. They did a good job. But if they've reached their ceiling or their lid, if I can't help remove their lid, then I need to leave them in their little jar and go on and do my thing. And, that's been people like Chris and Debbie and Pastor Kenny Smith, Hanan Oxen Handler, Damien and Sean, I sponsored them. And it's when they're at their best, like right now, they're killing Japan and taking turns going over there. That's when you want to run with those people because they will make your game bigger. But I find it necessary to change leaders pretty often too. And I share that with you because we all have a tendency to have the same 4 or 5 people we hang out with, and everybody's going to have ups and downs. And if you just stay with those 4 or 5 people, you're just going to find yourself going up and down with them.
Yeah, Christina, I've noticed that, when we first got started in the business, you just kind of know what you know and the people that you know and the circle that you're in. And just being in that launch with you out in Ohio kind of started to open our eyes up to, that there's so many different opportunities in this business to meet other leaders and to kind of pick their brain and see what they're doing. And that's where those events like Ambition and Simulcast are such a big thing to get around, some of these other leaders and find out what they're doing,
Yeah. And listen, everyone can do more than they think they can do. They frequently don't try to do more because they don't think they can. But if you'll just stretch, and that's what I was going to talk about on stage, by the way, I was the law of the rubber band, and I'm talking about stretching, and that's important to me. So you get a chance to watch the video, we'll see what we said about that. But I believe you have to force yourself to stretch on a daily basis.
That's right. Well, I'm going to see if anybody out there has got any questions. I'm going to put it in a mode where I can see if you want to raise your hand up there, if I can see it. Okay, let me just scroll through. Any questions out there? There we go, Ryan. I'm going to unmute Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. Good, Ryan.
Hi, Steve. Appreciate you talking to us. Have you ever had people where maybe you thought that, or you talking to them that they could use the extra money, but they're just not really good at maybe at possibly being leaders, and so maybe you want to just take their list and tell them, hey, I'll work this list for you? Have you ever done that in the past?
I've done it in the past, and because of that, I will never do it again and haven't in years. I won't work your list for you, but if you've got a list and you're shy about working it or whatever it might be, if you've got the time to work with them, what I'll do is just ask them to introduce me to the people. They've got to at least get on a 3-way call with me and introduce me, and I'll take it from there. But if they're just handing me their list, I know another 1,000 people I hadn't had time to call. I'm not going to go work their list for them. But you know what? You don't have to be a leader to be successful. I mean, I've had some senior consultants on my team bust $20,000 a month because they just brought a few slow-moving people in who brought the next queen of network marketing, and it blew up for them. So you just got to get in, but don't do it for people. In my opinion, that's like gathering customers for someone. You're creating a dependent consultant instead of an independent consultant. So if they want to work more slowly, let them work more slowly. But if they're shy and reserved and not willing to introduce you to people, or they don't think it's worthy of their time, then I'm sorry, but they're not worthy of your time. Go find somebody else.
I had a situation the other day where somebody said the exact same thing that Ryan just said. They said they were talking to a person. They said, well, just give me your list and I'll work it. And I said, call them back and tell them you were lying because you're a regional consultant and you're only going to work it until you go senior,
Yeah.
And so it's just not the way things go. You're looking for people to lead. So let's see, is there any other questions out there? If I don't see your hand, you can always text the chat on there. So, all right, here we go. Larry Venzel, let me unmute you. Okay, go ahead, Larry.
I had to chime in and say hello anyways. Hey, thanks, Steve, for coming on. We appreciate it. I came from a meeting over in Pittsburgh today, and Raphael from Large Commercial was up, and I spent some time with them. Wondered if what you heard in Texas about Large Commercial, and now that it's in Pennsylvania, what kind of monies and what's a good avenue to move forward with that. I'm in a commercial refrigeration business, and a lot of my customers are commercial, so I have a lot of avenues there to go down.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, he's a sharp guy. I tell you what, they stole from the right company when they got him. He really knows his stuff. But just bear in mind that the big money is never in customer gathering, even if it's commercial. We all gather customers because we have to have a few to get paid on our downline. That's where the big money comes from. But if you are pretty much a full-time ambit consultant, well, what that really means is you're working 15, 20 hours a week on ambit. You're taking 20, 30 hours a week off. Since that is actually kind of dumb, that's the time to sell commercial. In other words, if you've got spare time, and don't go try and make a commercial sale and take away from your recruiting because you're going to lose money in the long run. But if you have the time, then it's worth doing. And if it's big commercial, don't learn it. Just make the referral and take half the commission. But if you know somebody, if you have commercial customers for your refrigeration business anyway, pick them up. You don't have to know anything. You can just turn it over to Raphael's group, let the referral system work. They'll do all the heavy lifting and all the knowledge, and you get half the commission. But you got to focus on the main thing, and the main thing is recruiting new consultants and helping them get their first few customers and help them sponsor their first few. That's where all the big money is. You'll make hundreds of dollars in commercial, but you can make hundreds of thousands of dollars building a business.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so let's see who else we got out there. All right,
Peter.
Alan, let me unmute you real quick. Hang on. Go ahead, Alan.
Hi, gang. It just wouldn't be fair if at least one Canadian didn't come on the call, Steve. I'm one of them. It was a pleasure to meet you. I was at the first 4 meetings in Calgary. I had to miss just the very last one.
Oh, wow.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. I was recruited by a mutual friend in my little community south of Calgary. I moved from Calgary, but just quickly.
Oh, I got your picture now. Okay, yeah, I remember meeting you there. I had to scroll across to find you.
Oh, very kind. Yeah, Tim Ullinger, and then Brad Simpson, who's somebody who's under Tim Ullinger, was the one who called me. He started recruiting me a few months before Ambit actually opened in Canada. So very exciting. I'm taking this business seriously. I want it to work. I need it to work. And just very excited about the whole thing. One regret is that I didn't find it earlier in my life, but of course that wasn't meant to be. I guess 2 specific questions. One is I'm very excited that I'm able to do business in the U.S. Was a little disappointed in most of my contacts are in places where Ambit isn't, like Montana, Idaho, Washington State, Colorado, Utah, to name the main ones. That's where kind of my main contacts are in the U.S. I do know one Texan, though. I haven't contacted him yet, but I'm going to.
Well, you need to do that. In those other states, you still want to call people and let them know you're doing this. It's like, putting dibs on them in case something changes. But be sure and ask them who they know that knows somebody in one of the 18 states we're in, or in Alberta, or in Japan. Because people know people everywhere. I've had people make executive consultant living in Jerusalem. I've got ECs in Washington State now. Don't let that stop you. They know people.
That's a great answer. Appreciate that encouragement. And that's what we need here. Is I can see already in this business that I seriously need to. It's just all about the numbers. I can seriously see where I've just got to bring on tons of people. And I was encouraged by you saying not necessarily babysitting them, not in your words, but letting them succeed or fail and go to the next one. I think if I'm reading you correctly and how to build that.
Yeah, you're right. I tell people when I sponsor them that for the next 30 days, I'll run with you if you want to run. I'll walk with you if you want to walk. I won't ever sit on the bench with you. For 30 days, I expect to hear from you at least every 72 hours. If a 3-day period goes by and I don't hear from you, I assume you're sitting on the bench. Love you, but I'm moving on. And so I'll haunt people for their first few weeks. But if they want to sit down, I'll let them sit down. There's, so what? Somebody else is waiting. You got to go. I'm one of the biggest failures in all of Ambit. I've been told no more, laughed at more, been, told that it won't work. 75% of the people I sponsored should have bought lottery tickets because they didn't do anything. They'd have been better off with a lottery ticket. But with a 75-80% failure rate, now there's close to 250,000 people on my team. And if you got, 10 or 15% of those working any given day, that's a big number. Law of large numbers, it works for you or against you, but it always works. So you are absolutely on track. Help them get off to a good start, but only help people that are willing to help themselves. If they're not, move on.
Just last thing in closing, I don't want to dominate, but Tim Ullinger and Brad Simpson are both examples to me. So therefore, I'm trying to lead by example as well. Even though the investment was zero for me, I still felt compelled to get my $100 within 28 days, which I did. And the reason I did that is because I don't want to ask any of my team to do anything I am not prepared to do myself. I just wanted to report to you as a senior in the business.
Well, congratulations, and I'm glad to hear that because you got off to a good start and you only have one chance at a first impression and you made it. Now, go. If you can do it, you can show other people how to do it, show other people how to do it, and just know that most people won't walk across the street to try and pick up quarters on the side of the road. You and I will, and that's what we got to do. Get out there and go pick them up. They're all shiny quarters.
Okay, Steve, I got a question that was texted in from Jerry on the on his iPhone. He said, "Thank you for your insight, Steve." He said, "Question: how do you overcome the continual negativity from tainted customers while only having limited time for prospecting during a workday?"
Maybe somebody explain that. What do you mean, customers?
Yeah, like if disgruntled customers or people who've had issues with either deregulation or rates or different things in the past.
Well, if they are disgruntled and don't want to be a customer, I don't want anything to do with them. I just move on. I only need 20-something customers, so why would I do that? If I have to convince them to be a customer, they're the wrong guy. If they are my customer and they join you good faith and they have a problem, I'll stop whatever I'm doing to help them because they're the lifeblood of my business. But you got to get customers. Your customers really got to be people that well enough to say, "I need help. Will you help me? Yes or no?" Sure, I'll help you. What is it? That's the answer you're looking for. The ones that say, I worked this morning with one of my biggest leaders, and they said, the last 7 people in a row told them, "No, I'm uncomfortable with that," or "I'm not sure about this," or even worse, they'd say, why don't I get back with you next week about it? All of those are methods to say, I'm not the right person. Quit wasting time with me. Go talk to somebody else. You only need 20 customers. There's 300, over 400 million available now. Find somebody else. But I just don't spend time. I'm sorry to put it that blunt, but there's people out there praying for a chance to change their life and change their family's life. And if you're trying to convince your uncle to be your customer and he's negative about it, you need to just walk away because you can't get caught up in that and miss the real goal. My own family wouldn't be my customers. My sister, my brothers, they wouldn't be my customers. I still love them, but I didn't spend any more time on them because my business doesn't depend on them. It depends on me.
All right, let's see here. I got Rob Malone over here.
By the way, Chris Atkinson's, I personally sponsored Chris and worked with him, and he always tells audiences that for the first few months he worked with me, he just thought I was mean. And now he said he finally learned how to be mean himself.
Yeah.
And now he's half my organization.
All right, Rob, go ahead.
So my question goes back to when you were talking about going to Canada the first time, and you were saying that you sent out over 200 letters, and you had about 7 people that you were actually able to get with, and 4 of those were the ones that actually got started. So you're looking at like 2% of people that you actually contacted. But what were the percentages coming out of those 2%? Where I know you were talking about adaption, and
I was already pretty successful in Excel, and within 6 months of those 4 people signing up, my Canadian paycheck frequently was larger than my United States paycheck. Wow. It was the single greatest success I had in my 9 years in Excel communications, and that's why I was right back up to Canada now.
Right, and that's what I was trying to explain to some of my people was it doesn't matter what your percentages are. I mean, if you're getting the right people is what.
Yeah, and if you're good at this, you realize that the percentages are the percentages. There's very little you can do to change that, except what the gentleman speaking a minute ago from Canada said, and that is ask more people, run the numbers. Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm the biggest failure around. And I when I'm working my business, I get up in the morning and say, wow, let's go see how fast I can fail today. It's good enough. Because I know massive failure, you can't succeed your way to success. It's impossible. You have to fail your way to success. So the goal is fail forward, learn from it, and go again. But yeah, when you're cold calling, because these were people I didn't know, I'm sending letters to insurance agents, trying to talk to them just because I'm an insurance agent. And, I had probably 50 of them talk to me. 30 of those talked in very ugly terms to me. They were very unhappy to hear from me. I said, oh, thank you very much. Bye for now. Go to the next one. It's like, you are so right. If you can get 1 or 2%, you just have to be asking a lot of people. By the way, one of those 4 became top 10 in Canada.
Wow. Yeah, I know when we, early on just made the shift personally to not sell customers, we look for, like you were saying, recruiting. And that really came in handy in Ohio because, that first couple, that first rate that came out, it was kind of like what happened in Canada where the rate wasn't great. And most of our team never really even noticed it because we never emphasized the rate. We never emphasized going out and comparing rates or selling customers. We asked people to do us a favor. And my grandma wouldn't switch if the rate, went up a little bit. She just trust me that I'm going to take good care of her. So I think it's our, kind of the position we've always taken. Anybody else?
I guess we can sum this webinar up and say, okay, who's excited about getting out there and failing in a hurry tomorrow?
Yeah.
Let's get the big time rejection. Let's get told no and laughed at, and then retire early, wealthy.
That's right. All right. Any other questions out there? I see some hands going up. All right. Last shot here. I see a coffee mug going up. That's Steve. That's Steve. How about Josh Allen? Do you have a question out there, Josh? Hold on a second. Let me unmute Josh. I thought he was. No, he's muted. All right. I thought he was going to ask you about a fishing trip or something like that. All right, Steve. I want to ask you one last question, and since no one else has one, I'm going to go ahead and ask you one. You've had a pretty successful career in all different walks, and we talked about personally about what you've done in music and your ranch and things like that. What was a moment in your life where you just had that major turnaround and breakthrough that kind of set you on the path that you're on today?
I think it was probably when I was 7 or 8 years old when I found out that most of the other kids couldn't change a flat on their bicycle, and I could get them to pay me to change their flats. And then that was my first big lesson in realizing that if you learn to do what other people won't, you end up getting what they don't. And, it carried forward. Everything in my life has been, what can I do to serve other people that'll cause them to pay me? Or even better, in our business, it's perfect. You don't get paid for what you personally do. You get paid for what you set in motion. In other words, if you want to attract wealth, you simply have to become more valuable to other people. So that's what it is. And I've had as many failures as I've had successes. I just don't dwell on the failures. I learn from them and go on and try something else. But I am a serial entrepreneur. I've been, as you and Christina know, I've been in a lot of businesses, not just network marketing. I mean, I buy and sell everything and work, and I still own parts of 2 or 3 different businesses. I enjoy learning. I'm very curious about it. If I see something, an industry, I study it. If I think there's an opportunity, I see what piece I can get of it.
That's great. And then I guess our last question to you would be, Christina and I are moving to Florida, and we're actually going to be going down in a few days with our first trip. And it's obviously not a deregulated state. I would have rather moved to Texas.
Our family thought we're moving to Texas.
we're moving, like, you going to Texas? Like, no, Florida. But give us some pointers. I mean, we were down there a couple of weeks ago, and we met a lot of people who weren't from Florida. We met some Canadians and Texans and things like that. So give us some pointers on what to do down there.
Yeah, it's really cool. I spent a lot of time in Florida, as you know, and the neatest thing to know is it's regional, as in if you're on the East Coast, like Fort Lauderdale, Miami area, all the transients are from the Northeast, what you're used to. That's where your New Yorkers and all your New Englanders are. So, those are the areas that'll link you right back to that. The Gulf Coast will bring you more Midwesterners, which is not as particularly good, although you might now be picking up some people from Ohio and Illinois and Indiana. But work those regions where the connections are. Where you're going to be over on the Gulf Coast, you're going to be mostly exposed to local people and or people from the West or Midwest, and you'll just have to see what you can link up there. But it's not a very wide state, so make sure you spend some time over in Fort Lauderdale and that area, because it's just like you just go look at how many nonstop flights a day there are from New York or Boston to Fort Lauderdale or Miami, and you'll know how much traffic's going on there. So you may find that in Florida you get your biggest New York team ever going.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you should move to Texas instead. Hint, hint.
Okay, yeah. 2 years, we'll be there. So Tim Devine had sent us information about the state of Florida voting on deregulation. And while we're in Florida, what would we say to the locals about that? How do we get them primed to vote in November 2018? Because our rate that we sign up for electric is 17 cents right now.
Yeah. Well, go to my Facebook page. You're friends with me on Facebook, and you'll see where I ask everybody that knows anybody in Florida to urge everybody to vote. And I don't remember the name of it right now, but it's posted on my Facebook, and you just need to urge people to do it. I would have no doubt that if you said you're moving from Florida to Texas in 2 years, you probably won't. We'll probably be in Florida by then. Just like I think we'll be in Nevada. And when we go to Nevada, that'll force Arizona, and those two combined will force California. So it's just going to be a set of dominoes coming for a while. Big states, that's big time. You get Florida and California, that's like opening Texas again.
Right.
I think that was another question that I had, but you already answered it. That when you look like in the next 10 years in Ambit, you've been in Ambit. 5 years, and you've been 11 years, and how the growth is, and you look at it and we see 6 states, and now how many in 2 countries. What are you looking at in the next 10 years for people who are just getting started in the last month? What do they have forward to?
10, 15 more states, 2 or 3 more provinces of Canada, half dozen or more other countries.
Wow.
A $5 to $10 billion company paying out 5 to 10 times as much commission every day, every month as we do now. The future is theirs. It's theirs. Just the thought that we opened 2 countries in the last 6 or 8 months, like, go figure.
Yeah.
It's becoming commonplace. We are the largest direct seller of energy in the world, and now we're gonna step up and become one of the largest sellers of energy in the world.
Yeah, I have one more person's got a quick question, Steve, so I want to unmute here if I can. Just hang on. Cheryl, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, go for it.
Hi. Thank you so much. I'm driving, so I apologize. Thanks so much for helping with my consultants in Canada. I did have one question. On a couple of Zoom calls, we've had Sherelle and another gentleman from California talk about social media and about building your business on social media as well as relationships. And I was just wondering how you felt about that.
Absolutely. This is relationship marketing. The relationship comes first. And in today's world, the fastest way to build and rekindle former relationships is social media. I mean, I've recruited a lot of people from Facebook, LinkedIn. More importantly, there's a lot of people you haven't thought of in a while, and I promise you they're on one of the social media sites. You can connect with them. Just always remember that you always put the relationship first. Don't advertise on Facebook. Don't ask people, don't post something saying, hey, who wants to make money in Canada or anything. When you do that, you've just shot yourself in the foot. I mean, it's rough. You know, when you treat somebody bad on the playground when you're a kid and they don't want to talk to you for a few days, it passes in a week or so. When you do that on Facebook, they unfriend you. It's forever. So you got to be real careful about that. Use social media to make relationships, build it, take the relationship off of social media into the real world, develop it with phone calls and or visits, and then recruit. But if you skip all that, skip the relationship and go to social media just to recruit, you're just a fake watch salesman on Manhattan as far as everybody's concerned, and they don't want to be around you. So just follow that real close. Just remember, no matter what you do in life, the relationship comes first. Marketing comes later. Keep that in mind, and you'll be in good shape. Seems like audio went away.
All right, there we go. I just muted myself.
Okay, good.
I muted myself while you were talking. So I appreciate you coming on, Steve. I am going to wrap it up because it's almost 10:30. I do want to, hopefully when Florida does launch, we can get back together down there and launch a new market. So
I'm ready.
yeah. So I'm going to post this up on YouTube here in about a day. So look forward to it, and you can share it with your team. So thanks for coming on,
Thank
Steve.
you. Tell Michelle we said hello.
Okay, thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, remember, get excited, stay focused, never quit.
Never quit.
That's right.
Woo,
Thank
Steve!
you.
Yay!
Thank you, Steve. Let me get everybody unmuted. All right. Let's see you. I'm unmuted.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks, Marc and Christina.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Steve.
Thank you.